Hi everyone, my name is Alex, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what is community in this series of what we call Community Management 101. It's a very broad overview and a very basic understanding of what community is and how community management works and what it impacts, but I thought it would be quite helpful to go about it by starting off with a definition about what is a community. Obviously, it's a group of people. There's no surprises here. They have a common place and they have social norms that they follow, which are established by the group, and they have a sense of belonging. So, a concrete example here would be a football club. A football club that is, the common place being the stadium or the pub to come together and watch the football, the way they conduct themselves within that group and the way they support themselves, the kind of typical chants for a specific football club. Those are social norms. And the sense of belonging comes from being fans and following the same football club. There are three different types of community. First one is location. It's a location-based community. What that means is it's based on a city, a region, a country, or even Reddit. So if I say to you the Reddit community versus the Twitter or now X community, they get a very different sense of there's a definitely difference between those two communities. On Reddit, for example, one of the social norms that has established itself is the going quite significantly off track or off topic within the comment tree and have little in jokes and things like that in there. And that is perfectly accepted, if not encouraged, on Reddit. But that's a social norm that's been established for that. Versus in a now ancient history almost, forums, that would be probably moderated or not allowed, or you would get notifications that you shouldn't be doing that, of going off track. Versus on Reddit, it's a core part of the Reddit experience. But it's the place, the location, that is the central reason for people coming together and forming this community and establishing social norms around it. The second one is an interest-based community. This is where video games fall into as well. But it's a sport, pottery, fandoms. The core reason of coming together and connecting is the shared interest. And that brings the formation of the community about. So playing a game together or meeting somebody who's a fan of the same franchise, all of these are things that create an immediate sense of connection and belonging, and you have something to talk about. And that brings about the formation of this community, which is an interest-based community. The third type of community is a belief system community, the most obvious example being religion, but also political ideologies. Things like that are belief-based communities. And when we look at the behavioral dynamics and how communities recruit new people, how they grow, and what they're ultimately looking to achieve, Web3 actually follows the system of a belief-based community. It's the belief that is the core reason of coming together. Religion being an example of the church, the church coming together on a Sunday in the congregation and forming a connection with other people in there. That is the core reason of why community is forming and exists. Each of these types of communities have different behavioral dynamics and different interactions, and they also have quite strong emotional responses, especially when we look at the belief pillar. They provoke very strong emotions and very strong reactions. And they establish social norms in a different way, and they create different sense of belongings. Belonging to a city community is maybe not as strong as belonging to a faith-based community. So each of these types of communities, they require a different strategy and approach when it comes to community management. While they all are communities, community management builds culture and this helps with the social norms and enforces social norms. But based on the type of community you're dealing with, there's a little bit of a different approach and a nuanced approach of how to go about that. So where does my product from the video games world fall into this? Video game is an interest-based community. If it's a first-person shooter game or a casual game or 30-hour story game, it is an interest-based community that is forming around that. And it's that one game and that one brand that is the interest that is creating a community around it because it's that shared entity. When you are looking for a platform or a publisher, so the EAs and the Ubisofts and the Activision Blizzards, these are location-based communities. They are not just necessarily following one brand and one game. And as a result, it's a much broader scope, and therefore it's a location-based community. And the behavioral dynamics and how they recruit new members into the community is definitely a location-based community. And the last one listed here is a Web3 game. And Web3 games follow the belief system community. Because of Web3 having this very strong belief system dynamic, Web3 games follow the same principle of how to recruit new members and how to interact and what is the core reason for existence. It's also the reason why a couple of years ago, when the introduction of NFTs, cryptos, and Web3 in general, infringing on the video game space was met with quite strong reactions from video gamers, and that did not go down that well. But that is the reason why, because it's very two different types of communities with very strong and different emotional drivers and behaviors that clashed here. You can read a little bit more about it on the website, where we actually have an article, it's just a 1.5 minute read, where that goes a little bit more into detail about Web3 and video games. So what is community management for, and what does it influence? Well, community management uses social research methodologies to identify the emotional drivers of that group of people that actually dictate their behavior. So we do that by creating customer insights, and we help with those customer insights that inform decision making, to then craft and communicate messaging to help manage the feedback loop both ways. And ultimately, we are advocates. We are the spokesperson of the player within the studio. When you look at it from like a few years ago, it was the quotation mark people who read the forum is like, yes, that's correct. But reading forums is actually a type of social research. Today, we quantify those things. We use sentiment analysis and things like that. We even look into prediction and trend analysis and subtopic conversations, things like that we can do today. That helps us to identify what is the core driver, what is the real emotional influence that is driving and influencing this group of people. And then we help with our data in combination with player data to help to make decision making within the studio. So a good example here being a weapon being discussed about being nerfed or being buffed. And if we, as the community management group, know that based on what our data, our social research tells us is this is the most hated gun ever, so yes, it's a good idea to change, or it's the most loved gun and it's super well balanced in the perception of the community, it's like maybe be gentle about that change that you want to do. And it's those kinds of, guiding decisions with additional data points that are player, user-centric is absolutely critical for a studio, because the agile project management side of it is core of that is the turnover time from feedback. So player and user feedback being absolutely critical, and having the spokesperson that speaks for the player in the room is incredibly helpful of making a player-centric decision. So what does community impact? I mentioned before with a culture builder, with the voice of the brand. So we impact the audience, and the audience is everybody who is a potential player. There might not be a player yet, but everybody who has an exposure or a touch point with the brand and is a member of the target audience more specifically, is they are impacted by what community does. The second group is the players, the actual everybody who plays the game. If we help make decisions in the interest of the player, it helps every player, not just the ones that are talking to us and the ones that follow our social medias, but everybody that plays the game will be impacted by community management. The next one is followers. So everybody who follows a social channel or who follows all of our content, they will be consuming. It can be marketing content, community content, CRMs, all of the kind of facets of how we push information and content out there. Everybody who follows will have a touch point with community as a result. And lastly but not least is the core of the community. These are the ones that actually engage with the brand beyond consumption, which means to actually speak with us. They are letting us know, sometimes in very colorful language, of what is great and what is not so great. The interesting thing about this particular chart is that while we are very much entrenched and focus a lot on the core community, they are representative of the wider followers, players, and audience. It is sometimes a tricky balance of making sure that we do not get too caught up in a vocal minority or in an underrepresented majority. So we work with player data to make sure that what we find is applicable and accurate with what we see in the wider game. But a core community, what we do with them, how we converse with them, the culture that we build with them, the social norms that we establish with them have an impact on the followers, every player, and even potentially a decision making of an audience member to, yes, I want to play this, or no, I don't want to play this. A good example here is League of Legends, a little while ago, was having a reputation of being quite a negative, toxic place to be. And an audience member, which actually myself included, is I consciously chose not to play that because I don't want to be in that environment. So community management can help, facilitate a more positive environment, both in the game, working with other people, and outside the game with managing the channels, right? So the other side of the impact is we impact the entirety of the player journey. When we first get any touch point with the brand, any kind of brand awareness, if it is a trailer, if it is a news article, whatever it may be, from the first touch point of the brand, of becoming aware of a game or a platform or a Web3 game, it immediately establishes a connection with community. The community already impacts that very first touch point. Then it ultimately becomes to the play decision, right? Do I want to play this game that I just become aware of? And this is again where community management has an impact on making that play decision, which then leads to eventually, hopefully, downloading the game. Is it on Steam? Is it on Xbox and PlayStation? Is it on Epic Game Store? Do you have your own launcher? And when you launch it via Steam, do you need to launch it again? Things like that, and smoothing that journey from first touch point to download the game and get into the game. That player journey can be quite critical of having a spokesperson for the player within the studio, which is community management. Then obviously, if you need to make an account, do you use an Xbox account? Do you have, is the Steam account enough? Do you run your own accounts? Like GDPR topics, how complicated is it to run up an account? At what point in the I'm becoming aware of the brand, to I'm downloading and playing the game, do I make the account? Do I make it before download? Do I make it after download? Do I make it during a download? All of these kinds of questions can help smooth the player journey from get into the game and play. From a community management perspective, it's like we can help advise and have data of what the player tell us. And then we have player data directly on the feedback side of how we can smooth that journey to make it better for the player, impacting everybody, not just the ones who are talking to us or the ones who follow us. Obviously, the onboarding, the first few hours, the critical moments in the game of the decision making of the player to, yes, I want to continue playing this, or no, it's not for me, or it's like, it's not what I wanted, or those critical few hours, and smoothing that experience and onboarding, the hand holding aside. And if something doesn't go right during that time, how easy is it for the player to overcome it? Are there workarounds published? Is there an FAQ? Is it potentially even in the game that helps the player to handhold the first few experiences to get the actual game experience, which comes after that? Which once you actually overcome the, the initial learning curve and you know now what to do, and you can actually make a decision of like, yes, I want to play this a little bit more because I'm enjoying this. And then what is the actual game experience like? And is it repetitive, the same thing over and over again? Or is there different things? How do you get from one experience to the next? All of these are topics that community management can be helpful as the spokesperson for the player. And then once, that person, that player is ready to have a feedback or have a conversation or encounters a bug, we definitely are going to be here about that. And we are also going to be able to help facilitate the conversation in the studio of like, this is a really critical point for the player, and working with customer support, like they get to hear about all of these lovely topics as well. That leads to a closed feedback loop to then implement hopefully as quickly as possible. A player always wants it tomorrow. Obviously that's not possible. We understand that. But that conversation is quite a critical one of closing the agile project management loop and then communicating back to the players of like, hey, your feedback make a difference. Thank you. And that little feedback loop of closing it in the other way, as in telling the players, yes, your feedback has been implemented, thank you so very much, actually gives quite a lot of sense of achievement and even like sense of belonging, which ultimately leads to retention, right? The other side of retention obviously is new content, and how do is new content exposed to the player? How can we help make the new content as interesting and as appealing to players as possible, which ultimately leads to brand loyalty. That once we have a brand that is established and we have a loyal community that is playing it and is enjoying it, and once a sequel comes out, looking at Assassin's Creed series, for example, is like there is already a well-established audience that is ready to have that game very quickly because of the brand loyalty that was established throughout the process of building the community and improving the player journey to the point where it is today. So community management works with a lot of different teams across a lot, just the entire company and studio. But the critical bit to remember about this is that the community is the spokesperson for the player. We are the ones who are the representation of the player within the company or within the studio. And having that mindset of thinking about the player is a very helpful one to really make a experience user-centric. And I'm saying experience, not just the game, because it's the entirety of the player journey that has an impact on the awareness of the brand, of the loyalty to the brand, and the perception of the brand. If you are exposed to a brand and you love the game, it's amazing, but everything surrounding it is atrocious, and it takes 14 weeks to get a reply from somebody. It's like, that's not a helpful. You need to think holistically, and it's the unification of the entire player journey that really helps to run a user and player-centric operation. That is it for What is a Community for Community Management 101, and you can find more on our website, and the series shall continue. See you the next time.